Hello, my name is Sarita. I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Delhi, India. Today, I'm going to talk about the novel No Guns at My Son's Funeral by Paro Anand. My focus is on how the novel rethinks the terrorist child through affective vulnerability rather than ideological convictions. I will start my presentation by framing this problem. Set in the insurgency torn Kashmir, the novel follows Aftar, a teenage boy from a peace oriented family who is gradually absorbed into militancy through emotional longing and the desire to belong. Anand's sparse, empathetic narration resistance set in insurgency-torn Kashmir. The novel follows Aftab, a teenage boy from a peace-oriented family who is gradually absorbed into the militancy through emotional longing and the desire to belong. Aftab's sparse, empathetic narration resists sensationalism, exposing how political violence recruits children not through ideology but through loneliness, humiliation, and the hunger for the recognition. In the security discourse, the terrorist child is typically treated as evidence of failed morality or ideological infection. Anand's narrative unsettles that framing, portraying childhood as a site where fear, protection, and surveillance coexist. When a mother warns her son, they take away a father of such boys. You are young, just a child. You don't know what's going on out there. Care become indistinguishable from fear and innocence from suspicion. Through Zara Ahmed's conception of emotion as circulation, aligning individuals with communities through the intensity of their attachments after heaviness, his heavy heart treated as an affective condition, not as a moral flaw. His emotional burden reflects a world where futurity itself is unevenly distributed. As his mother laments, there was a time when we were just Kashmiris, and that was enough. By situating the terrorist child within these affective and temporal economies, Anand's novel reframed militancy as a symptom of dispossession, urging readers to confront how children's lives and deaths become collateral within the intertwined logic of nationalism and security. I will begin with a theoretical framework. This paper draws on the interdisciplinary framework that brings childhood study, affect theory, and scholarship on scrutinized childhood into conversation to link the terrorist child with moral and ideological paradigms. Existing discourse on child militancy offer privileged portion of radicalization and belief, overlooking the affective and the structural condition that make certain children more prone to the militarized capture. Within childhood studies, scholars such as Karen Sanchez Appler and Sharda Balgopalan have shown that childhood is not a universal or protected state, but a politically regulated one, unevenly distributed across class, gender, and geography. Sanchez Appler's notion of dependency illuminates how childhood's very condition as non-autonomy makes it available for adult projection and control. In the novel, Aftab's subjectivity is repeatedly overwritten by political scripts such as nationalist, militant, scrutinized, and that exceed his capacity for agency. Sarah Ahmed's account of emotion as circulation provide a complementary lens. For Ahmed, emotion aligned with communities through the intensity of their attachment. After a movement through militancy can thus be read as not as a belief formation but as an affective orientation, the result of humiliation, admiration, and longing that precede ideological understanding. Affect theory clarifies how emotion function as both the site and the mechanism for recruitment. Finally, drawing on Elsinja Hunmana and Swati Prashar, this paper situates Aftab's story within global studies of child soldier and scrutinized vulnerability. Hunmana's concept of caused and seduced participation and Prashar's insight on loyalty in injury both highlight how precarity is emotional as much as material. At this intersection, this paper developed the concept of affective grooming, the emotional condition through which childhood dependency becomes political subjection, revealing how Anand's novel exposes the making of militancy through feeling rather than fate. Central to this process is Akram, the militant reader, whose power rests less on ideology than on recognition. Positioned between mentor, protector, and the surrogate skin, he offers Aftab validation unavailable within home or school. Anand framed this attachment in familial and aspirational terms. Akram, whom admired like the brother he didn't have, so handsome, so tall, so sure of himself, and who was the only one who never made fun of it, but the but made the others shut up when they laughed about the way he still listened to his mother. Admiration becomes the effect that mediates Aftab's entry into militant space. Akram transforms obedience and emotional sensitivity into the sign of loyalty rather than weakness. Militancy become not conviction but refuge, offering recognition where other spaces often disparage. Ahmed's concept of affective stickiness clarify how such attachment persists. Emotions stick to some bodies more than the other, shaping the surface of body in the world. Admiration, protection, and shame adhere to Aftab's body, orienting him towards militant masculinity before comprehension arises. Anand explores this strategy explicitly. You have to use them while their dreams are bigger than their knowledge, while they are still hypnotized by its romance. Here, immaturity is weaponized. On Mana notes, many children are coerced, some seduced by promise of glory or excitement. Anand's narrative does reframe militancy as effective grooming within structural precarity, a system where emotional hunger, not ideology, secure children complicity. But then, while militant space in the novel operate through affective seduction and aspirational belonging, the domestic sphere sustain a different yet equally constraining effect of economy of effect. Anand's portrayal of family life is not a moral counterpoint to militancy, but part of the same structure of feeling, revealing how care and protection are reshaped under militarization. The home became a site where child was both sheltered and confined, producing a heaviness that rendered alternative future increasingly untenable. Central to this dynamic is Aftab's mother, whose attachment to a pre-militarized Kashmir articulates nostalgia as effective refuge. Her collection, her recollection, there was a time when we were just Kashmiris, evoke not recoverable history but the emotional residue of coexistence and safety. This aligns with Bal Gopalan's observation that child become a site through which past is mourned and the future is anxiously anticipated, producing a temporal compression that weighs heavily on the present. Nostalgia here intensifies generational disjunction, positioning the mother's memory against the child constrained now. Violence further intrudes under the guise of protection. Aftar's father, Aftar's father discipline intended to safeguard the family is experienced as humiliation and fear. A sharp cut on his ears and the young boys and his stay reeling. The blows rained hard when Apu was angry. He simply lost all control. As Balgopalan notes, under extreme precarity, care often takes form that discipline rather than enable, binding children more tightly to survivalist futures. Protection merges with punishment, and the child's body became the tyrant upon which fear and control are enacted. Clementine clarified this temporal foreclosure, arguing that childhood present is continuously banished in favor of a vision of the child as either a past memory or future promise. Aftab is denied both the past survive as material nostalgia and the future as militant and scrutinized demand. Childhood collapses into an overdetermined present burdened by expectation and fear. Through this juxtaposition, Anand reveals that the heaviness of childhood in militarized context arises not only from the overt violence but from the culminative effect of fear, nostalgia, and constrained care. When childhood is structured by such weight, by remembered past and demanded future, such care itself becomes a site of constraint, exposing the limits of familial protection in securing a livable future. Now I go to the secular part of my presentation, elegy, silence, and the ethics of terrorist child. The culmination of the novel is marked not by redemption but by Aftab's silencing. Anand refuses to grant him a coherent voice or moral positioning silence as ethical and aesthetic response to militarized childhood. During interrogation, Aftab calls confession. He forced me. The words spilled out as easily as a tear from his eyes. Miserable Gaddar, hang your head in shame. What you have done reveals how speech became a means of survival rather than testimony. What remains unsaid carries gender ethical weight than confession. This instability echoes Honwana's observation that children frequently change their narratives, which make it difficult to decide which version of the narrative to adopt. Anand frames such fracture as the structural effect of coercion or deceit. Silence and distortion become survival strategy where speech itself is dangerous. The novel conclusion transformed loss into elegy. It was war. In a war, there was no exception, no kindness. Elegy here mourns not only death but the erosion of shadows as livable category. Lauren Berland's conception of attrition, the wearing out of the subject, qualified this exhaustion. Aftab's silence resulted from cumulative pressure of their fear, grooming, and endurance. As Bowyer similarly notes, the adult reliance on the potential might of the child is also acknowledgement of its incompleteness and failure. By aligning silence with elegy, Anand resists synchronized demands for uh, legibility. The closing injunction, no guns at my son's funeral, no slogans, only silence, reclaims mourning as refusal, indicating the political architecture that rendered childhood expendable and insisting that silence at last speak most truthfully. I conclude my presentation. The novel with this the novel ultimately resists demand to make the terrorist child legible within the moral and ideological binaries that dominate scrutinized discourse. Through Aftab gradual evolution into militancy, Paro Anand reveals how childhood in militarized context is not simply violated by violence but reorganized through it. The novel foregrounds how effective vulnerability, loneliness, and admiration uh, shame and the desire to belong precede ideology, shaping the condition under which political violence becomes thinkable for the child. But I have termed affective grooming, name this process the emotional conditioning through which dependency and inspiration are transformed into political subjection. Crucially, Anna refused to locate redemption either in a domestic sphere or in the militant resistance. Family care, nostalgia, and protection are themselves reshaped by fear, discipline, and the temporal foreclosure, producing the same happiness that render alternative future increasingly untenable. In this way, the novel exposes how childhood becomes the site upon which competing political imaginaries, nationalist, militant, and scrutinized, are inscribed, each demanding loyalty while denying livable futurity. The novel closing is silence function not as a withdrawal but as an ethical refusal. By denying the child a final coherent voice, Anand resists the instrumentalization of childhood as evidence, warning, or symbol. What remains is an elegiac point that indicates the political architecture which render children's life expendable, there that's meaningful only insofar as they can be explained. Yet ending to the silence, the novel asks us to not judge a child, but to confront the effective and the structural conditions that make childhood itself unbearably heavy. Thank you. Wow.